Welcome back to Chilling Stories, where every shadow hides a secret. Tonight, we're peeling back the layers of a cold case that's been sending shivers down spines in the Arizona desert for decades. It's a tale whispered in hushed tones, a chilling narrative of a forgotten motel and a traveler who checked in, but, as far as records go, never checked out. We're journeying back to 1995, a time when the world moved a little slower, when cell phones were a novelty for the privileged few, and getting lost on a lonely highway truly meant being utterly, completely alone. Our protagonist in this unsettling saga is Ethan Cole, a traveling salesman in his mid-30s. Ethan was, by all accounts, an ordinary man just like you or me. He was simply trying to make a living, driving the long, monotonous stretches of highway that crisscrossed the vast, often unforgiving American Southwest. It was a Tuesday, a day that began like any other, promising routine and the familiar drone of the open road. But by late afternoon, the sky had begun to bruise, turning a deep, ominous purple, and before the sun could truly set, it unleashed a torrent. Rain lashed against his windshield with an almost violent intensity, transforming the already desolate Arizona landscape into a blurry, watery canvas. Thunder rumbled in the distance, a low, guttural growl that promised not just a long night, but a truly arduous and terrifying one. Ethan was bone-tired, his eyes gritty from the relentless hours behind the wheel. The rhythmic, hypnotic sweep of his wipers, usually a soothing companion, was doing little to calm his increasingly frayed nerves. He was on his way to Phoenix, a city that now seemed impossibly far away, but the sheer ferocity of the storm was making any real progress impossible. Visibility was dropping by the minute, and his hands gripped the steering wheel tighter with each passing mile. Then, without even a flicker of warning, his old sedan sputtered. It was a faint sound at first, a hesitant cough, then a more pronounced choke, and then an abrupt, terrifying silence. The dashboard lights, which had been a comforting green glow, winked out, plunging him into near total darkness. The only light now came from the fleeting, explosive flashes of lightning that momentarily illuminated the drumming rain, revealing a world both hostile and alien. His car, his trusty companion through countless miles, had finally given up the ghost. He was stranded, not just stranded, but truly isolated, miles from anywhere, in the very heart of a monsoon, on a forgotten stretch of highway that seemed to stretch into an infinite void. Ethan cursed, a raw, frustrated sound that was swallowed almost immediately by the storm. He pounded the steering wheel, a futile gesture against the overwhelming circumstances. He tried the ignition again, a desperate turn of the key, but the engine was utterly, irrevocably dead. He got out of the car, briefly, the wind tearing at his clothes, the rain instantly soaking him to the bone, seeping into every pore and chilling him to the core. He popped the hood, squinted into the impenetrable dark, but there was no hope, no flickering spark, no telltale sign of life. He was stuck, marooned in the middle of nowhere, just as a crushing wave of despair began to settle over him, threatening to engulf his last vestiges of hope. A faint, flickering light pierced the thick curtain of rain ahead. It was a neon sign, barely visible to the relentless downpour, a pulsating, sickly green against the oppressive black sky. With each flicker, it struggled to spell out two words: Motel 13. Beneath it, a smaller, equally faded sign, its letters barely clinging to the metal, advertised vacancy. It looked like something ripped from a forgotten film noir, an anachronism clinging precariously to the very edge of the known world. It wasn't inviting, not by any stretch of the imagination, but at this desperate juncture, it was nothing short of salvation, a port in the storm, however unsettling it might appear. With no other viable option, Ethan grabbed his briefcase and small overnight bag, slung them over his shoulder, and began the long, arduous, and incredibly wet walk toward the motel. Each step was a squelch, the road beneath his feet transformed into a shallow, churning river. The wind howled around him like a banshee, tearing at his clothes and chilling him further. It carried with it the heavy scent of damp earth, rain-soaked asphalt, and something else, something metallic and profoundly old, like the smell of rust and forgotten dreams, a scent that hinted at long-abandoned things. As he got closer, the flickering neon sign, still struggling to complete its message, revealed more details about the establishment. The M was half burnt out, giving the impression that it simply read Motel 13. The building itself was a low-slung U-shaped structure, painted a faded, peeling beige that seemed to blend into the gloom. The windows were dark, like vacant, unseeing eyes staring out into the tempestuous night, reflecting nothing but the relentless rain. A single weak porch light, its glow barely strong enough to push back the encroaching darkness, illuminated the entrance, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to twist and writhe with a life of their own. He pushed open a heavy wooden door to the lobby, and a bell jingled, a surprisingly cheerful, almost incongruous sound in such a desolate and foreboding place. The air inside was thick, heavy with the unmistakable smell of dust, stale coffee, and something vaguely floral, like potpourri that had long since surrendered its scent, leaving only a ghost of fragrance behind. The lobby itself was small, claustrophobic, and dimly lit by a single bare bulb hanging precariously from the ceiling, casting a sickly yellow glow on the worn linoleum floor. An old, moth-eaten armchair, its springs probably long gone and its fabric faded to an indeterminate color, sat forlornly in one corner. Behind a scarred wooden counter, a woman sat hunched over a tattered paperback, her silhouette stark against the dim light. She looked up as Ethan entered, her eyes sharp and dark like polished obsidian, assessing him from behind thick, wire-rimmed spectacles. She was old, her face a road map of countless wrinkles and deep-set lines, her hair pulled back tightly into a severe, almost painful-looking bun. Her name tag, barely legible from years of wear, simply read Martha. "Evening," she rasped, her voice like gravel being churned in a dry riverbed. "Rough night out there, huh?" Ethan shivered involuntarily, water dripping from his sodden clothes onto the already damp floor, forming a small, dark puddle around his feet. "You could say that," he replied, his voice a little hoarse from the cold. "Car broke down a few miles back. Any chance you have a room available?" Martha nodded slowly, her gaze lingering on him for an uncomfortably long moment, as if she were trying to read his very soul. "Always got a room for a weary traveler," she said, her voice still raspy. "Especially on a night like this. Only cash, though." Ethan, desperate for shelter and warmth, dug into his wallet, pulling out a wad of crumpled bills. At this point, he just needed a dry bed, a working phone, and the hope of a mechanic in the morning. "That's fine," he said, pushing the money across the counter. "Do you happen to have a phone I could use? Mine's dead, and I really need to call for a tow." Martha pushed a worn, leather-bound ledger across the counter, its pages thick with age and use. "Phone's in your room," she stated plainly. "Just dial 9 for an outside line. Sign here." Ethan picked up the pen. The ledger was filled with ornate, looping signatures from decades past, some faded almost invisibility, others bold and clear, a silent testament to countless lives that had passed through this place. He scrawled his name, Ethan Cole. He noticed a date column, clearly marked, 1995. "Room 7, Martha said, her voice cutting through the silence as she pushed a heavy brass key across the counter. The number 7 was etched deeply into a wooden tag, worn smooth by years of handling. "It's down the hall, second door on the left." As Ethan reached the key, his gaze drifted to the row of numbered cubbies behind Martha. He noticed one, slightly larger than the others, with a heavy, rusted padlock hanging from it. It was labeled, in faded, almost illegible paint, 13. "What about room 13? Ethan asked, a casual question, born more out of idle curiosity than any real interest. Seems like an unlucky number to most, but some say it's lucky. Martha's eyes, which had softened almost imperceptibly for a moment, hardened instantly. A strange, almost imperceptible tremor ran through her, a subtle shift in her posture. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a low, conspiratorial whisper, even though they were the only two souls in the entire lobby. It was a voice laced with an undeniable edge, a warning that transcended mere words. "Room 13 is closed, young man," she said, her gaze fixed on his, unblinking. "Always has been, always will be. It's under maintenance. Has been for a long, long time. And it's best you keep your distance from it. Don't go near it, you hear me? Not for anything. Not for curiosity. Not for a dare. Not for anything." Her intensity caught Ethan completely off guard. It wasn't just a simple warning. It was a command, a desperate plea, imbued with a deep, unsettling fear that seemed to emanate from her very being. He nodded slowly, a little unnerved by the sudden shift in her demeanor. "Understood," he murmured, "just curious." He took the key, the brass cold and heavy in his hand, and headed down the dimly lit corridor. The floorboards groaned and creaked under his weight, a symphony of old wood and settling dust, each step echoing in the oppressive silence. The air grew noticeably colder as he moved away from the faint warmth of the lobby, carried with the faint metallic smell of old pipes and decay. Rain drummed relentlessly against the roof, a constant, maddening rhythm, and the wind rattled the windows with a mournful, sighing sound. Room 7 was exactly as he expected. Small, Spartan, and overwhelmingly old-fashioned. A single, lumpy bed, its mattress probably older than he was, dominated the space. A chipped nightstand with a rotary phone, its cord tangled and yellowed, sat beside it. A small, flickering television set with rabbit ear antennae occupied a corner. The wallpaper, a faded floral pattern of indeterminate origin, peeled at the corners like old skin, revealing the plaster beneath. He dropped his bags, shivering uncontrollably. The heater, an ancient wall-mounted unit, groaned to life with a wheeze and a shudder, blowing out a stream of dusty, lukewarm air that did little to dispel the chill. He tried the phone first, his hopes pinned on connecting with the outside world. Lifting the heavy receiver, he dialed 9, then the local tow company number he found in a tattered, coffee-stained phone book left on the nightstand. He listened to the monotonous brawling, and then a click. His heart leaped. "Hello?" he said, his voice laced with desperate hope. But instead of human voice, he heard his own voice, distorted and hollow, echoing back at him from the receiver. "Hello?" He tried again, thinking it was a momentary glitch, a bad connection. "Hello? Can anyone hear me? This is Ethan Cole. I need help." Again his own voice, eerily replayed, mockingly hollow. "Hello? Can anyone hear me? This is Ethan Cole. I need help." A cold dread began to creep up his spine, a sensation far more chilling than the physical cold. He slammed the receiver down, the plastic clattering against the cradle. The phone was dead, or worse, playing some kind of sick, twisted trick. He was truly isolated. No phone, no car, no way out. He tried to distract himself, to push back the encroaching paranoia, turning on the ancient television. It buzzed to life with a crackle and a hiss, displaying a static-filled image, a grainy black and white movie playing silently, its characters moving like ghosts. He tried to ignore the growing unease, telling himself it was just a storm, the profound isolation, Martha's strange warning playing on his tired mind. He lay on the lumpy bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the relentless drumming of the rain. As the night wore on, the storm intensified its assault on the old motel. The wind howled like a tormented spirit, and the rain hammered against the window pane with relentless fury. Each drop a tiny hammer blow. Thunder cracked directly overhead, an explosive sound that shook the entire building, making the walls vibrate and the floorboards tremble. Ethan tried desperately to sleep, to find some oblivion, but his mind raced, replaying Martha's words, the dead phone, the chilling isolation. Then he heard it, a faint, rhythmic knocking. Tap, tap, tap. It was soft, almost imperceptible above the cacophony of the storm, but it was unmistakably there. It seemed to come from the wall directly opposite his bed, the wall that separated his room from Room 13. He sat bolt upright, his heart leaping into his throat, straining his ears to discern the sound. The knocking stopped as abruptly as it began. He tried to rationalize it, to dismiss it as a wind, the old building groaning under the strain of the weather. He lay back down, pulling the thin, threadbare blanket tighter around him, trying to convince himself that it was nothing. A few minutes later, it started again, louder this time, more deliberate, more insistent. Tap, 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 and then he heard whispers, faint, indistinct voices, like a conversation happening just beyond a thin, permeable veil. They were too muffled to make out any specific words, but the cadence, the rise and fall, was unmistakably human. A low murmur, then a higher-pitched, almost childlike sound, a fleeting giggle that sent a wave of ice through his veins. It sent a shiver down his spine that had nothing whatsoever to do with the physical cold of the room. He got out of bed, his heart now a frantic drum against his ribs. He crept to the wall, pressing his ear against the cold, peeling wallpaper. The whispers seemed to grow louder, then recede, like a tide ebbing and flowing. He could almost make out a name. Ethan? No, that was impossible. His imagination playing cruel, terrifying tricks on him. He was tired, stressed, and alone. That was all it was. Then a new sound, faint music, an old tinny melody, like a broken music box playing from a distant forgotten room, or a Victrola winding down to its last mournful notes. It was a waltz, slow and mournful, punctuated by the occasional crackle and hiss, like an ancient recording. It had a melancholic, almost haunting quality to it, completely out of place in this dreary, forgotten motel room. It spoke of bygone eras, of forgotten dances, of profound sadness. The unholy combination of the rhythmic knocking, the spectral whispers, and the haunting, spectral music was too much. His rational mind struggled desperately to find a logical explanation, to cling to some semblance of normalcy. Was someone in room 13? But Martha had said it was closed, under maintenance. For a long, long time, her words, imbued with such stark fear, echoed in his mind. He glanced at the door leading to the hallway, then back at the wall separating him from room 13. Curiosity, now inextricably mixed with a growing, suffocating fear, began to gnaw at him, a relentless worm in his gut. He had to know. He had to. He crept to his door, slowly, deliberately turning the knob. The hallway was darker now, the single bare bulb in the lobby barely reaching this far, casting only long, distorted shadows. The air was heavy, stagnant, carrying a faint, cloying sweetness. He tiptoed down the hall, his bare feet silent on the creaky floorboards, each step a testament to his growing terror. The sound from room 13 grew clearer now, more distinct, more insistent. The waltz, the muffled whispers, and that maddening rhythmic knocking. He stopped at the door to room 13. The heavy, rusted padlock glinted dully in the faint, ambient light, a symbol of enforced closure. He pressed his ear against the cold, rough wood of the door. The whispers were closer now, more urgent, more numerous. He thought he heard his name again, clearer this time. Ethan, a chorus of voices, like dry leaves rustling in a forgotten breeze. He pulled back sharply, a gasp catching his throat, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He looked at the padlock. It was old, rusted, a relic of time, but it seemed firmly in place, securing the door. Yet the sounds were undeniably coming from inside. As he stood there frozen, paralyzed by a mixture of fear and morbid fascination, a sudden, blinding flash of lightning illuminated the entire corridor, momentarily turning night into day. In that split second of intense, brilliant light, he saw it. The padlock, though rusted and old, was not fully secured. The shackle was slightly ajar, a hair's breadth of space, as if someone had hastily closed it without bothering to click it properly into place. His heart pounded with renewed ferocity. He looked back at his room, a haven that now seemed impossibly far away, then back at the door to room 13, a gaping maw of unknown horrors. Martha's chilling warning echoed in his mind, a ghostly whisper. Don't go near it. Not for anything. But the sounds, the whispers, the music. They were pulling him in, an irresistible siren call that promised answers, however terrifying they might be. He reached out, his hand trembling uncontrollably, and pushed on the door. It didn't budge at first. He pushed harder, a surge of adrenaline coursing through his veins. A low groan of old wood, a sound like a tortured sigh, and then, with a soft, almost imperceptible click, the door swung inward a crack. A gust of stale, frigid air wafted out, carried with it the undeniable scent of dust, decay, and something else, something sweet and sickly, like forgotten flowers left to rot on a forgotten grave. The music and whispers abruptly ceased. Silence. A terrifying, absolute silence, more deafening than any noise, broken only by the incessant drumming of rain outside. Ethan hesitated, his mind screaming at him, urging him to turn back, to run, to flee this place and never look back. But he couldn't. He was drawn in, caught in the undertow of an unknown current. He pushed the door open further, just enough to slip his slender frame inside. The room was pitch black, a void that seemed to swallow all light. He fumbled blindly for a light switch, his fingers brushing against cold, rough plaster. He finally found a pull cord, hanging limply from the ceiling. He tugged it with a desperate hope. A single, bare bulb flickered once, twice, then reluctantly cast a weak, sickly yellow light over the scene. What he saw made his blood run cold, freezing in his veins. It wasn't a room under maintenance. It was a museum of forgotten lives, a mausoleum of lost souls. The room was utterly filled with old belongings, haphazardly strewn about, as if their owners had left in a desperate hurry, or perhaps never left at all. The air was heavy, oppressive, as if time itself had stopped here, trapping everything in an eternal, suffocating present. There was a faded, leather suitcase in one corner, half open, spilling out a woman's delicate silk scarf and a worn copy of a novel, its pages brittle with age. Next to it, a child's toy, a wooden train with chipped, peeling paint, lay abandoned. On a dusty dresser, a man's ornate pocket watch lay open, its hands frozen at 3:15, a silent testament to a moment lost to eternity. A half-eaten plate of what looked like petrified toast sat on a bedside table, next to an ancient unmade bed, its sheets yellowed and stiff. The air was thick with the dust of ages, a palpable weight that pressed down on him. He walked further into the room, his breath catching in his throat, each step raising a puff of ancient dust. This wasn't just old junk. These were personal effects, intimate remnants of lives abruptly interrupted, snatched away. He saw a pair of spectacles resting on a faded newspaper, its headlines from decades past. A woman's pearl necklace was tangled around a tarnished silver locket, its delicate chain broken. A child's drawing, crudely taped to the wall with ancient, brittle tape, depicted a sunny house with stick figures, a stark, heartbreaking contrast to the gloom and despair of the room. His gaze fell upon a small, rickety wooden table in the very center of the room. On it, amidst a scattering of old, sepia-toned photographs, was a single, framed picture. He picked it up, his hand shaking uncontrollably, the frame cold against his clammy skin. It was a black and white photograph, yellow with age, its edges frayed and softened by time. It showed a man, standing confidently in front of a familiar-looking motel, a younger, more vibrant version of Motel 13. The man was smiling, leaning casually against an old, vintage car. He had dark hair, a confident grin, and a slight, distinctive scar above his left eyebrow. It was him, Ethan Cole, but the photograph was dated, printed subtly, almost imperceptibly, in the bottom right corner, in a looping, elegant script were the words, Motel 13, October 1968. Ethan stared at the date, then at his own reflection in the dusty glass of the frame, his face pale and contorted in disbelief. 1968. He wasn't even born in 1968. He was born in 1960. He was 35 years old. This was impossible. A trick of the light, a cruel, elaborate joke, a hallucination brought on by exhaustion and fear. He flipped the photo over, his fingers fumbling, his mind reeling. On the back, in the same elegant script, were 2 words, Ethan Cole. And beneath it, scrawled with chilling finality, checked in 1968, checked out never. A guttural scream tore from his throat, but no sound escaped. It was as if the room itself absorbed it, swallowed it whole, leaving only a silent, desperate gasp. The air grew heavy, suffocating, pressing in on him from all sides. The walls seemed to press in on him, the ceiling lowering, threatening to crush him. He felt a dizzying sense of vertigo, as if the very floor beneath him was dissolving, pulling him into an endless abyss. He dropped the photograph, his eyes darting wildly around the room, a frantic search for an escape that wasn't there. He saw them then, not just inanimate belongings, but faint, shimmering figures in the corners of his vision, ghostly, translucent forms, whispering, watching, waiting. A woman in a silk scarf, her face etched with sorrow. A man with a pocket watch, his eyes hollow. A small child clutching a wooden train, its laughter silent. They were there, spectral echoes of the room's previous inhabitants, all trapped, all waiting for company, for a new soul to join their timeless vigil. He tried to run, to stumble back toward the door, towards a faint hope of escape, but his legs wouldn't obey, rooted to the spot by an unseen force. He felt a cold, skeletal hand on his shoulder, then another and another, pulling him back, deeper into the room, deeper into the timeless, suffocating embrace of Motel 13. The mournful waltz music started again, louder now, a crescendo of despair, and the whispers turned into a deafening chorus of indistinct voices, all calling his name. Ethan, Ethan, welcome home, Ethan. The last thing Ethan Cole saw before the darkness consumed him, before he became one with the forgotten, was a flickering bare bulb casting long, grotesque shadows that danced on the walls, shadows that seemed to welcome him home, into their eternal, silent company. The storm broke with the dawn. The rain had finally subsided, leaving behind a world washed clean, though still heavy with moisture, the air thick with the scent of damp earth. A lone patrol car, its blue and red lights flashing faintly, almost apologetically, in the early morning light, pulled up to the abandoned Motel 13. Officer Reed, a veteran of the local sheriff's department, a man who had seen too much and believed too little, stepped out, his boots crunching on the gravel. He was responding to a call about an abandoned vehicle several miles back, a sedan registered to an Ethan Cole, a traveling salesman who hadn't shown up for his important appointment in Phoenix. Officer Reed had a bad feeling about this place. Motel 13 had always been a whisper in the county, a recurring rumor, a place where people checked in and sometimes just vanished. Cold cases, old wives' tales, local legends, but enough to make the seasoned officer's hair stand on the back of his neck. The kind of place that just felt wrong. The neon sign, still half burnt, still read, Motel 13, a silent, broken promise. The lobby door was ajar, creaking slowly, rhythmically, in the morning breeze, a lonely sentinel. He pushed it open. The bell above the door remained stubbornly silent, broken perhaps, or perhaps it simply had no more greetings to offer. The air inside was still, heavy with dust and that same faint, unidentifiable floral scent that seemed to cling to the very fabric of the building. No one was at the front desk. No one was anywhere. The silence was absolute, heavy, almost sentient. He called out, his voice echoing in the cavernous, empty space. Hello? Sheriff's Department. Anyone here? Only his own voice echoed back, swallowed by the profound, insatiable silence of the old building, a silence that seemed to mock his presence. He began his methodical search, checking the rooms, one by one. Room 1, empty. Room 2, empty. The beds were unmade, the dust thick on every surface, undisturbed for what felt like years. It looked like the place had been abandoned for decades, not just a single night. He found room 7. The door was slightly ajar, inviting him in. Inside a rumpled bed, its sheets askew, a still flickering television showing nothing but static, its ghostly hum the only sound. A phone receiver hanging off the hook, swinging gently, almost imperceptibly, as if recently disturbed. A faint smell of stale coffee, and something else, a lingering scent of profound fear. No sign of Ethan Cole. Finally, he came to room 13. The door was closed, but not locked. The rusted padlock was dangling, unsecured, just as Ethan had found hours earlier. He pushed the door open, a sense of foreboding settling over him like a shroud. The room was dark, the pull cord for the light bulb swinging idly, teasing him. He pulled it. The bulb flickered once, twice, then settled into a dim, unwavering glow, casting long, unsettling shadows. Officer Reed stepped inside, his hand instinctively resting on the butt of his service weapon, his senses on high alert. The room was empty, completely, utterly empty. No old belongings, no faded photographs, no signs of life or death. Just bare walls, a dusty floor, and a single, ancient bed frame, its springs exposed like a skeletal hand. It was as if the room had been meticulously cleaned, scrubbed bare, or perhaps was always this way, a blank slate waiting for its next victim. He stood there for a long moment, the silence pressing in on him, the air thick and heavy. He felt a chill, despite the warming morning air, a cold that seeped into his bones and refused to leave. He knew, with a certainty that transcended logic, that this was where the trail ended. Another missing person, another ghost story from Motel 13, swallowed whole by the desert. He walked back to the lobby, his boots echoing loudly in the stillness, the sound jarring the oppressive quiet. He approached the front desk, his gaze falling upon the worn leather-bound ledger. He opened it to the last entry, a morbid fascination guiding his hand. His finger traced the faded ink. Name, Ethan Cole. Checked in, October 10th, 1995. Checked out, never. Beneath that, an earlier entry, dated October 1968, for a Mr. E. Cole, also with no checkout date. And before that, similar entries, stretching back decades, names fading into illegibility, all without a checkout. A silent, terrifying pattern. Officer Reed closed the ledger, a profound sense of unease settling over him, a cold dread that he knew would stay with him. He looked around the empty, silent lobby, then back at the flickering neon sign outside, the M still dark. Motel 13. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to bone, that Motel 13 wasn't just a place where people went missing. It was a place where time itself came to a standstill, a hungry, waiting entity that absorbed travelers into its timeless, spectral embrace, adding them to a collection of forgotten souls. He left the motel, the jingle bell above the door still silent, a broken promise of welcome. He got back into his patrol car, started the engine, and drove away, leaving the flickering sign and the silent, waiting building behind. He never looked back. So if you ever find yourself on a forgotten highway, caught in a storm, and you see a lone, flickering neon sign promising vacancy at a place called Motel 13 on a lonely road, just keep driving.